This is our first Fireside chat, so I'm excited, and so are the rest of the people, the panel and guests. But before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land, and I would like to give my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to be here. I would like to acknowledge the partners for this event, UNSW, Hindu Society, PGC, and the rest of the students, etc. So thank you very much, and please welcome all our premium guests over here. Founder of Winnie CEO Sleep Out, Bernard Pihan, who I know for 8 years now, the mayor of Randwick, Dylan, and one of our board member / director of Macquarie Bank, Cassie. So please welcome. Give them a good round. All right, welcome. How do we begin? Bernie, you got the mic. I'm so impressed with your title, OAM. Either one, you start with OAM or Winnie CEO Sleep Out. I think I know you from Winnie CEO Sleep Out. So tell us, how did it all begin? How did it unfold?
Thank you, Kumar. The Winnie CEO Sleep Out, I guess, is the gift that keeps on giving back to me. It obviously keeps on giving to Vinnie's in terms of the funds raised. So I'll go through that story, but one of the things that I'm very grateful for is that it's also given me the opportunity to be awarded the OAM a few years ago. And I'm sure you can imagine that was the last thing on my mind when I started to do what I did with Vinnie's. So I'll simply go through that story. With respect to the OAM though, it then continues to open doors. If we look at what you're doing with Opportunities Australia, Australia is the land of opportunity. However, some doors are open and some doors are closed, and some are open for some people and closed for others. So I'm very aware of the privilege that I've got, and having an OAM gives me even more privilege in a sense. So I'm very grateful for that, and I continue to use that for the original purpose as to why I started the CEO Sleep Out originally. I'll try and keep the story short initially, and we might come back to some of the points later on. But in 2006, I was a financial planner. AMP Foundation were giving money to charities through financial planners where we were involved with particular charities, and they were matching dollar for dollar the funds raised. So I was involved in fundraising dinners, so very much a traditional way of raising money. And with my background in engineering and design, I approach almost everything as a design problem, identifying what the issues are and what the resources we have to solve the problem. And the problem was, how do you design a better fundraising dinner? We did those dinners for a few years and they were very good, but we would raise about $30,000. And it was a little bit odd having a banquet to raise money for people who couldn't afford their next meal. So with a spirit of innovative thinking that was evident from one of the employees at Vinnie's at the time, my children were actually doing sleep outs already, so a sleep out was not a new idea. Really, the simple and only innovation was CEO Sleep Out, connecting that activity to a particular target market, and then checking with others to see whether it was a good idea or not. And it's those first followers that really determine whether you're a leader or not. Otherwise, you're just a nut with a crazy idea until you check with others and you get a team of people. So in that first year, it raised about $5,000 and the dinner raised about $30,000. In its second year, it raised about $40,000. But $30,000 of that came from one person. And then in the third year, it raised $40,000 again, thereabouts. And in the fourth year, it raised $620,000. So that's when it really started to take off. It went national, and just last year, in its 17th year, it's raised over $9 million, and it's raised nearly $90 million for Vinnie's over those 17 years. So I had lots of ideas. That was a good one. I had lots of bad ideas as well. Like I say, it's certainly the gift to Vinnie's that keeps giving to them. But the real focus of it is a bunch of CEOs quietly listening to the story of someone who is or has been homeless. And for that moment, the world's turned upside down. And the impact of that is significant. And instead of jumping in your car and driving home, you get to wake up many times through the night reflecting on it. So it has massive impact. And that's a little bit about how it started.
Tell us how you got there. It's been amazing.
How I got there? A long journey. I am older than I look. So I started a long time ago. I'm a chartered accountant by trade. And at school, throughout school, I didn't really know what I wanted to be. Growing up, my dad's a doctor, my aunt's a doctor. I've got a lot of medical people in my family. I thought, I'm going to be a doctor. Following my dad's footsteps. That's what they, expect of me. And then I realised I hate the sight of blood. One day my dad was, cutting something and he cut his leg open. He said, hold this for me so I can stitch it up. No way. So that was the turning point. I'm not going to be a doctor. So throughout school, I didn't really know what I wanted to be. And I kind of fell into other people were applying for cadetships at accounting firms, internships, doing all that kind of stuff. And I thought, I'll try that because I'm not really sure what I want to do. I like maths, so I was good at maths at school. And then I got a job as a cadet at an accounting firm. So I thought, okay, I'll try that, see if I like it. A few years later, I started working when I was 18 in an accounting firm. My first salary was $18,000 a year. And I was amazed. I thought it was amazing. Then I kind of, as I got through uni and started out in the professional world and kind of saw how it all worked, I thought, no, I want something bigger than this. I want something more than this. This is I want something that I can affect change and, make a difference. Not that accountants don't make differences, but to me, I really wanted to do something a bit more, change and project and consulting type work. So I moved to a different accounting firm and got into the consulting world with systems and IT and risk and like all those sorts of things, and it was a lot more exciting to me and a lot more challenging for me. And then I kind of kept on that path of projects and consulting, changing my different environments. So I worked with different clients, and then I went to an actual consulting firm. I worked at Harvey Norman for a long time, putting in their computing systems. And then that took me across to Australia, and then I thought, no, I'm going to do something bigger with my life. Let's move to London. So I moved to London, and I lived there for almost 7 years doing project work as well. That's when I first started working in banks. So I spent a long time over in London, travelling around. From London, it was a great platform to travel the world. So I've been to, I think, maybe 45 countries in the world, just because I could hop on a plane, 2 hours later be in a different country. So I really liked that time of my life. I was young and single and was able to do whatever I wanted at the time, while still kind of working and kind of pushing myself to try new things and challenge myself professionally. So I kept taking on more projects, bigger projects. I put my hand up for a lot of things. So I didn't really wait for things to come to me. I knew I wanted to work overseas. So I moved to London, and then I got to London. I thought, I want to work somewhere else other than London. So I worked for 2 years in Mexico. So I went to Mexico. Again, similar job, but just a different place. I got to experience a different culture, totally different culture to what I was brought up with, and then where I lived in London. And then I thought, maybe I will move again, because I did 2 years in Mexico, traveled a bit around Central America, and I thought I'll move again. Worked in Hong Kong. So then moved to Hong Kong, again, different culture, same kind of work. That's been my constant, but really kind of chasing those different experiences. And then I thought maybe I should settle down and do something serious, and so I came back home to Australia, and that's when I applied to go to Macquarie. I thought, I really wanted to stay in banking. I really enjoyed banking. Macquarie had a great reputation. Really enjoy working with the driven and really smart people. And I like the work that they do. They have a great foundation. They have got a great investment reputation. So I thought I'd go there. And when I got in, I thought, I'll stick to my projects. I'll stick to the consulting type thing, because it's really worked for me after all these years. And then I got in there, I thought, maybe I'll push myself and try something else. So I then kind of put my hand up again and said, I think I want to try this operational role. This team doesn't have a CRO function. I'm going to set that up and I'm going to do that. So using all my background of my financial background, my analytical background, my projects and consulting, I've kind of brought them all together into this role.
How did I get here? It's a very excellent question, one I think I'm still somewhat figuring out, but a little bit about me. So I'm Dylan Parker and I'm the Mayor of Randwick, and I think looking at it going, well, what would put me on this particular stage, and I'm going, well, a little bit of imposter syndrome, going, well, why am I up here? And I think one of the things which stick out for me, which would be a little bit unusual, is looking at the fact that when I was elected as the Mayor of Randwick, I was at the time the youngest mayor in New South Wales, which to me didn't actually seem that unusual, except for the fact that I was probably the youngest person on any local government by a long shot, at least, whenever you go to any of the conferences or anything like that. But even in my own council chambers, I was the youngest by about 20 years. And I thought, well, as I was driving here going, well, what about my potential career trajectory made it a little bit different for everybody else? And I kind of was looking back and going, it's kind of been about, 12 or 13 years in the making, both at school, constantly running for things. And why I think that is something which I would just want to emphasise, whether it was at school, running for school captain, which I'm sure there are plenty of people who have gone through that particular experience, but running social justice campaigns, charitable campaigns, trying to raise money, because I was particularly passionate about issues which were happening overseas when I was in high school as well. But not only that, running political campaigns, because I was very passionate about, at the time when I was very young, around housing affordability and people being able to live in their particular communities. And I kept going back to this process of going, well, okay, what is something I care about, and how can I talk to as many people as possible about those particular things? And obviously, naturally, that gravitates towards politics in my personal instance, and that led me to at university, joining the Student Representative Council, putting my hand up for campaigns, to run campaigns there, running on a platform, and just talking to people about the issues which they cared about. Going from there, jumping into state parliament, working for one of the local MPs, working as a policy advisor, a media advisor, and personally as well, as the parliamentary advisor, whose job it was to look after not just my own MP who I worked for, but the whole state Labor Party at the time, in running all of the legislation through the Parliament. I was doing that at about age 22, 23, and did that for about 6.5 years. And during that time, one of the things that I observed is that there really is quite a diversity of individuals and personality types They all tended to look the same, I have to admit, but they're all very different in terms of character and personality, and all the while, very, very young and coming up against what would you know? Who are you? Why are you telling me what to do? Experience, and learning from that, I kind of was looking at it going, well, why am I working for other people, pushing their particular passion projects when I myself could potentially, keep running and put my hand up to run for elected office, because I really cared about the community which I was living in and wanted to give back there. And so put my hand up to run for council, because there was a gentleman who, what I could only describe as, had a superpower for getting into arguments, and I went, I bet you I could do a better job than that guy could. And the rest really was history, where we got on the council and then a couple of years later became the mayor. Why do I link through all of those particular things is, at each kind of juncture, as probably the youngest person in the room many, many times, I found that I kept coming up against that, well, what would you know? And part of me, as I looked at it and went, well, okay, yeah, look, you're very right. You don't have the experience just by virtue of longevity, but it's a fresh set of eyes. And what I am very happy to is, to date, lots of people have embraced that and have been very appreciative, because you didn't get stuck in the old habits. And so that's kind of what has brought me here to you now. At a university, running the Students' Association, running the Parliament, being a parliamentary advisor, getting elected on a council in rather unconventional ways, and then obviously as the mayor of a city, managing staff who are twice my age as well, which is a rather unusual experience. So that is the Cliff Notes version of what brings me here, I think, and my takeaway in terms of for people who are starting out on their career is, don't let the imposter syndrome take over, because often, at least my experience has been, is that the person sitting across from you 20 years your senior is also going through that as well, just for a whole range of other reasons. So that would be my takeaway.
I have a Chinese background. So my dad's from Singapore and my mum's actually from China. Pure, no mix. It doesn't confuse people, I think, when they look at me. Growing up, I think I did confuse people, so a lot of people did have that preconception of when they did look at me, they had an idea. Right? Growing up in the 80s probably wasn't my favourite time. And then when I spoke, it'd be, oh, you don't sound Chinese. And I thought, well, that's weird. How are they supposed to sound? Because that's how I've spoken the whole time. I was born here. My parents weren't, though, so maybe that's why. But that's something I've kind of wrestled with my whole life, and then going into the career path that I have and the places that I've worked. I guess, Dylan, you were always saying you were the youngest person in the room. I'm always the female in the room, and that's kind of been a big struggle, I guess. Also being young, but also being a female, as going through banking. A lot of the meetings that I'm in, a lot of the people that I work with, and as you get more senior, it starts to look very familiar. Very white male dominated, very few females, very few people with different backgrounds as well. So that's kind of, I'll answer your second question, Kumar, now. That's kind of what I'm passionate about, because I know, growing up, looking different doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Thinking different isn't a bad thing. Something that I'm really passionate about is that diversity in the workplace, not just from a male-female perspective or a gender perspective, but also your background, also what degree you've done, what you do outside of work. All that's really important, and we shouldn't be held back from moving up the ladder just because we have a different background or we grew up in a different place. So that's something that I'm really passionate about. And now I'm married a Danish person, so I changed my name just to confuse people as well. It's quite fun.
Crisis management is not something that I thought that I would be dealing with and getting ready for, in terms of having a mass city garbage strike. It didn't happen because of some rather tense negotiations and arm twisting and cajoling and pleading and long tense moments there. But what also keeps me at night is the fact that, you know, the best laid plans often lay in waste and never occur. You know, I remember when I first got elected, I'm sure some of you would remember, but I had a very, very busy week, which never happened because a gentleman very sadly got eaten by a shark in Little Bay, and that was the largest media story I have and media pack I have ever seen, and ran for very, very many days. And there was a bit of a vacuum for, I think, about at least 12 to 24 hours where there was next to no information out there outside of the fact that the gentleman had sadly passed. And because it was my local government area, I had, I can actually confidently say the world's media show up at the doorstep and camp out and wanted every minute detail and bit of information. So dealing from the New York Times, the BBC, Channel 9, Channel 7, Channel 10, you name it, they were there, and that definitely taught me a lesson that anything can happen, and you should be ready. So very, very luckily, and for anyone who is passionate about a career in communications, if you are ever offered the opportunity of media training, do it, and then do it again, and then do it again, because you may never experience the idea of having one camera pointed right down at you, and then not only having one, but having six, and having to articulately communicate grief, communicate clear bits of information that are factual and true, because my learning experience was that if I misspoke, I'd read it the next day and it was stated as fact, and so that was definitely a learning curve for me as well. So I think unexpected events are definitely what keep me awake at night, but what actually I find is very rewarding is being able to help community organisations and build community groups. Councils are really close to actually grassroots organisations, helping charities. I was able to help a women's drug rehabilitation centre with some things just the other day, and they were very appreciative, and that's very tangible impact there. So I think that's enough of me waffling on, but that's probably what keeps me up at night is unexpected events, but what keeps me showing up to work is the fact that you can really help a lot of community organisations.
I just before coming in here on my family messenger chat, one of my brothers was asking about the same thing, and there was an answer there that why somewhere back on my mother's side, I shouldn't tell everyone what my mother's maiden name was because that could help with identity theft, but but yes, there was a convicted criminal in the background there somewhere. So there's, I don't know which ship they were on, but that's part of the heritage. But on my father's side, my great-great-grandfather came from England and was a commissioner of railways in New South Wales in the way down in the 1800s. So, you know, there's many generations here, and that, in a sense, makes, you know, what Dylan was talking about, you know, it's a bit predictable and easy to pigeonhole me, you know, in that sense. But you know, very, yeah, I guess everyone has a heritage, and, you know, some of us, I've got friends who are adopted who don't seem to care too much for what their heritage is. They just happen to live in the moment and the fact that they're here. And some in those situations are really very, very keen to know exactly what their heritage are, and some that are adopted can happily live without it, you know. But I also think it's very interesting in most of the Western world at least, that the patriarchy is entrenched by the naming convention. That I I am a Fion. That's my surname, and I know what my great-great-grandfather did for a job. But I did ask my mother before she passed away about 9 years ago. I identify as a Fion, but I'm only 1/4 that when I look just back to my grandparents. So I asked her what was Ma Grant's maiden name, and she said Bogan. And I said, did you say Brogan? And she said, no, Bogan. So I'm at least 1/8 Bogan. So, and some people suggest it's much more than that. So,
I don't think. All right. Same question to you. What keeps you awake? Yeah, Bernie?
I think I don't have a lot of trouble sleeping. At times over the years, I've learnt techniques to go back to sleep so that I don't stay awake at night for long periods of time. So, I'll count backwards from 300 by threes, and that's just enough to keep my mind busy to fall asleep, and it seems to work. But I wake up exhausted because I dream all night. And I dream in lots of detail, and it's about problem solving. It doesn't matter what job I've got. I unfortunately overthink things, and I constantly try to work out the detail. So it's a superpower and a curse to be a perfectionist. And as I say that, I judge myself and saying, well, no, I'm not, because I can see all the imperfections. But I guess that's what a perfectionist does. And that ability, and the CEO sleep out is an example of it, and the fact that I'm trained as an engineer and a designer is a part of that package, that I can see the big picture, but I also can dive down into the details as well. Now, you can't do everything on your own, and luckily one of my other problems or complexes, I guess, is that I want someone to save me. Well, the upside of that is I acknowledge I can't do it all on my own, and I do actively seek to get a team of people, and I do actively seek to get experts to help. And if you do that, it's amazing what you can achieve. So I guess back to the question, what keeps me awake at night? It's whatever project I'm working on, I'm thinking about it down into the detail. And that simple question of what could possibly go wrong. If you suffer from anxiety, that can lead to catastrophizing things. But again, it's a superpower in the sense of risk management. You need to identify what things could go wrong and have a contingency plan in place.